Today is August the 5th, 2016. My name is Tanya Fincham. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and today I'm in Bonita, Oklahoma, to speak with Bill.
Bill Kolb. Jim Kolb is my dad.
Okay, to speak with Bill Kolb. And this is part of our Glass House project, so thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
And we're going to get into Conoco a little bit since it's attached to Glass House, so thank you for coming.
Sure, you bet.
Let's begin with when and where you were born.
I was born in March 27th, 1951 in Cushing, Oklahoma.
And how did you get to end up in Bonita?
Well, my dad, at the time in Cushing, was a lab technician at the local hospital. Then he went to work for Continental Oil Company in Ponca City. And then he got transferred to Bonita when I was in the first grade when the Glass House restaurant opened, and they made him the manager of the oil and gas operation of the Glass House. Conoco had the oil and gas rights, if you will, on the turnpike through a 25-year lease agreement. We had the Glass House restaurant, and then Conoco also had the service station in Miami, so my dad managed both of those.
Okay, so you came
for
because of Glass House.
Yes,
okay.
I did. That was solely why we came to Bonita.
Okay. So if you moved here in '61, the turnpike was already in place.
Yes, the turnpike was in place.
And the Glass House was already up.
Yes, actually that would have been 1957.
So,
I was born in '51. I just remember that I started the first grade in Bonita. I went to kindergarten in Ponca City, so I just happen to remember those years because that's when I started to elementary school in Bonita because of my dad's transfer.
Okay. And did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have an older brother, Tom, and he's the oldest, then me. Then I have a sister, Liz Williams, who lives here in Bonita, and then a younger brother, David, who lives in Muskogee.
Okay, so all pretty close.
All pretty close, and the three brothers were all State Farm agents as well, too. We ended up as agents with State Farm.
And are your parents still living?
My mother is. My dad passed away in 1985.
Oh, a while ago.
That's why he's been gone quite some time.
And was he with Continental Conoco for his career?
Yes,
for his career?
He was. He retired, I might be off a few years, but in his late 50s when the 25-year contract ran out that Conoco had with the Turnpike Authority. That contract was not renewed. I'm sure Conoco probably has great regrets they ever signed the agreement they did because I think they lost money all that time. So the contract wasn't renewed. They offered my dad a transfer to Houston, but he just decided he didn't want to move his family and he wanted to stay in Bonita, so he took what would be considered early retirement. Okay. So he retired in his late 50s.
Conoco had a pretty good separation package?
Yes,
yes, they
did.
Think.
Had a good separation package, and then he died in 1985. It was a tragic accident, but Conoco still took care of my mother through insurance benefits and others. So don't know how the company is now, but they were an extremely loyal company, family-based, oriented company. It was a great company to work for, even as an employee, and certainly my dad. If he was here, I'm sure he would say the same thing.
Okay. So you were here in Bonita when you were in the first grade. What was the name of the school? Was it Bonita Elementary or was it something?
It was Will Rogers Elementary. I think there's 2, 3, maybe elementary schools back then. I'm not sure how many now, but Will Rogers was the one that I went to.
Okay, and then Bonita High School?
Right, I had a Bonita Junior High, and then I graduated from Bonita High School. So I went from the first grade all the way through high school.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1969.
Okay.
So I'm a 69 mom.
Coming up on a major anniversary then in 4 years?
Yes.
3 years, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
Well, in high school, what was your favorite subject?
My favorite subject probably was English. My mother was an English teacher. In fact, she was my English teacher my sophomore year, or she was doing her internship. So, but from that point on, she was in teaching in high school while I was there.
So you had to behave.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say, and I couldn't tell her, well, I don't have any homework this evening, when she would ask me, don't you have some homework? Because she always knew, because the other teachers in the teacher's lounge kept her abreast of what I should be doing. So, but English probably, yes, was my favorite subject.
And would she read your term papers before you turned them in?
Oh, yeah.
Did you?
Still to this day, anytime I write a letter or an email, I'm very conscious of my grammar, my punctuation, preposition. It's ridiculous, but she instilled that.
So you're a comma king, isn't it?
Yes, and she'd be very disappointed. I've lost some of my skills over the years. but oh yeah, she reviewed every resume, anything I ever sent, really all my life. I always ran that by her for all those things, just to make sure.
And your grades probably reflected some of that.
They did. I did better in English than probably any other subject.
Mm. Well, when you were in high school, what were your plans for after high school?
Oh, they certainly changed, but I went to OSU on a football scholarship.
Oh, okay.
So my goals when I left here, gosh, it used to be the Big 8 conference, now it's the Big 12, but I wanted to make all Big 8. Oh, I had some big goals. I wanted to win the Heisman Trophy. I was going to put Veneta on the map, my hometown. But it didn't play out that way. I certainly wasn't all Big 8. Obviously, I didn't win the Heisman Trophy, or you probably would know who I am. But it was a great experience nonetheless. When my eligibility was up, I stayed on another year as a graduate assistant for the football program and coached what was then the junior varsity team that they had for a couple of years. Freshmen couldn't play varsity football when I first came there. That changed before I left, but for just a short period of time they had a junior varsity team of freshmen and redshirt sophomores, and then we played other teams in the Big 8. So I got to do that for a year and coach with some great people, Bum Phillips being one of them. He recently passed away, but he was the defensive coordinator then, so I got to coach under him. And,
well, who was the head coach then? I don't know my...
well, the head coach when I graduated was Jim Stanley.
I've heard that.
Bum Phillips was his defensive coordinator. Then Bum Phillips' son, Wade, was the head coach, if you will, of the junior varsity team. And I got to coach with him, became friends with him. Of course, he went on to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Denver Broncos. Bum Phillips went on to coach at the Houston Oilers and had quite a career as well.
What position did you play?
I played linebacker on defense.
Remember any memorable games that stick out? Beat OU while you were playing?
No, we never beat OU. I guess the most memorable game that I played in was my first one in Arkansas. And coming from a small town, probably the most people I ever played in front of was maybe 2,500 at a state playoff game. So when we came out on the field at War Memorial Stadium and 70,000 people calling the Hogs, so loud, as close as you or I are sitting, I couldn't hear my coach tell me what to do during warm-up because I couldn't hear him. So I thought, this is a long ways from Veneta, Oklahoma. It was pretty intimidating, just to be honest, being a brand new, well, I was a sophomore then. So that one probably sticks out more than most.
Did you win or lose?
No, we lost, and that was the year that Arkansas lost. And the national championship game to Texas. Richard Nixon flew in for the game. You know, it was a big deal. It was before they had playoffs like they have now, but it was quite a big deal. So Arkansas was that good. So nobody beat them but Texas. I think the last game of the year. So they were pretty good. As I recall, I think they beat us like 32-14. So but they were really good. I can testify to that, and fast.
Was it a long bus ride or a plane ride home?
It was a plane ride.
Was it plane?
Yeah, and it was pretty long and pretty scary too, because we were flying twin props, and we used to call it treetop airlines because they just barely cleared the treetops whenever we traveled. So not like they have now.
Puddle jumpers, I think.
Yes, puddle jumpers, treetop airline. We had quite a few nicknames for them. Yeah.
Well, where did you live on campus?
Well, then they housed all of the athletes.
In Bennett?
In Idaho. They had it was pretty brand new when I got there. It might have been 2 or 3 years old. But they housed all the athletes, golfers, wrestlers, swimmers, basketball, football. Housed all of us in the dormitory together.
I'm not sure where Idaho would have been.
Well, it would be right north of Kerr Drummond.
Okay.
It almost kind of looked like an exact replica on a smaller scale of Kerr Drummond. I've since forgot the name of all the other, kind of like twin towers, if you will, identical dormitories to the west of.
And when they tore one of those down, so it was.
Yeah, they may both be down.
Now, Kerr Drummond, I think, is still there, but the other one isn't.
I don't know what they call it now, but old Idaho, I know is still there. I'm not sure what's in it.
Okay.
But that was quite an experience in itself. And I think they probably realize now, quite a mistake to house that many athletes in confined quarters and that much testosterone and competition, and it was, they called it the zoo on campus. It was pretty crazy at times.
Did you get to pick your own roommate, or did they assign them?
They assigned your roommate when I was a freshman. Then after the first year, then you could pick, who you wanted to live with. So I had the same roommate after the first year. I had the same roommate for the next 4 years, and most guys did that.
So you graduated with your bachelor's in what year?
Education.
In 70.
Bachelor of Science in 74.
And then master's? Did you finish a master's?
No,
or
I
just
didn't
started?
do a master's.
Grad school, though, for just 1 year.
Yeah, I wasn't really too smart looking back, because Bum Phillips, the year after my graduate internship was up. Actually, the previous year, Coach Stanley, who was the head coach, said if you'll stay on another year with us, try to get you on as a coach here at OSU or maybe another Division I school. And I'd become good friends with Bum Phillips and Wade Phillips. But I was broke, and they wanted me to stay another year, and I said, Coach, I've got to get a job. So I took a high school coaching job right outside of Houston. And Bum Phillips that very year took the head coaching job for the Houston Oilers. And his son Wade came with him, and another friend of mine that was a graduate assistant. They went on to do great things in the NFL, and I was starving to death teaching school in Splendora, Texas. It all worked out. But
They say yeehaw there, huh?
yeah, it was one of those moments looking back, thinking, man, if I had just stuck around. But honestly, I didn't really want the lifestyle of a coach. I saw the year that I was around the varsity coaches. It's a hard life.
It's not 8 to 5.
No, and it's a nomadic lifestyle. They move all over the country. If you look at any one division coach's resume, about every 2 or 3 years, they have to uproot their family and move all over the country to climb, the coaching ladder, if you will. And I didn't really want to be at the collegiate level. That honestly was somewhat of a disappointment to me. But I know now really all the fun was in high school. When you get to the next level, it's very serious, highly competitive, and the camaraderie is not anywhere near what it was in high school.
So, competition with each other?
Yeah, very competitive and pretty cutthroat at times. And it's almost like 6 or 7 teams within a team, because the linebackers all practice every day together. The running backs were separate, and all of these, especially when we were all broken up, they were in practice, and at times we'd come together as a team. So you got close with just your small group of position players. Unlike high school, you know, where you were together from start to finish practice, you know, as a team. You know, you hunted together, fished together, drug main together, grew up together. It was just a lot closer. But at that next level, though, I did make friends for a lifetime.
And you played all 4 years?
Yes.
Played we're on the team all 4 years?
I tried to play all 4 years. Spent a lot of time on the bench. That was a humbling experience. It was for a lot of us, because everybody, when you get to that level, everybody's been a star since the first grade all the way through. And they've been told oftentimes, you know, how great you are. And then when you get to the next level, many of us, for the very first time in our lives, you know, rode the bench, you know, worked the star. And everybody was good at that level.
You contemplate stopping? Did you?
Almost every day.
What kept you going? The scholarship, or?
Yeah, it was a scholarship. I didn't have a full ride, but I was just raised that way from my parents and certainly coaches I had here in Bonita.
Finish what you start.
You just don't quit. Exactly. Finish what you start. And I had a high school coach. He wasn't here in Bonita long. Wasn't very popular. I'll let him remain nameless, but he was a basketball coach, and I just couldn't play for him. So, and that was my senior year, and I thought, well, I need to be lifting weights, getting ready for football anyway. But he didn't take it well. So he felt compelled to tell my mother that, you know, I'm a quitter, he'll always be a quitter, he'll quit at everything. And I thought of him many times when I wanted to quit, which all of us did. It was that difficult. So you questioned every day, is it worth it? So he was a bigger inspiration to me than he realized. And I didn't want to quit for a lot of other reasons, but certainly there's some moments that he always want to prove him wrong in spite of how hard it was.
Yeah. And your major was English, education?
Yes.
But what within education?
Well, actually, I got a degree I had a minor in education. I had a degree in physical education.
Okay.
And probably almost a degree in physiology. But early on, I decided I wanted to be a coach because of the high school coach that I had here in Bonita. And even with all the college coaches I had, some of them went on to be in the Hall of Fame. But my high school coach was the best coach I ever had, Ron Johnson. I mean, he had a profound difference in my life. And a lot of the kids back then, and I wanted to be him. I wanted to make that kind of difference, and that's why I wanted to get back to high school. You can't get close to the players at the collegiate level. You see them in practice, and that's it. But at the high school level, you know, you see them in the classroom, you see them around town, and I thought I could have a bigger impact at the high school level.
So you did that when you first went to Texas. You were a high school coach?
Yes, I went there as a high school coach.
How long did you stay there?
I just stayed there 1 year, and I was just too far from home. And really, honestly, they fired all of the coaches except for me and one other coach. That school hadn't won a game in 3 years, and it was a really bad situation. Very, very, very poor county, and a difficult time winning, but they fired the head coach. But before they fired him, the superintendent came to me and asked me what I thought. And I said, he should have been coach of the year, should probably give him a raise because we shouldn't have won 2 games, and we were in 2 or 3 other games. But that's how it works. You know, the coach that wins the conference championship or the state champ, he's the coach of the year. When truth be known, in my opinion, the coach of the year probably should have been that coach that maybe went 5-5 and shouldn't have won a game. And more importantly, had a tremendous impact on the kids that don't show up in the one-loss column. That's the real mark of a great successful coach, I think. It's not the championships. It's how many of your players want to come back and see you when their career's over and tell you what a difference you made in their life. The real true coaches, that's what they're in it for. It's not the money, you know, it's not the championships, but you have to have them or they're going to fire you. And Bum Phillips was the one that coined this phrase when I was at OSU. I probably heard him say it for the first time. He said it later when he became an NFL coach, so many more people hung on to what he said. But I heard him say it to me and some other coaches, young coaches that wanted to be in that profession. And I asked him about it. You know, would he do it again? And he said he would, but he said, I'm going to tell you something. There's 2 kinds of coaches. Those that have been fired and those that are going to be fired. That's what you mean. He said, well, if you don't win, they're going to fire you. And if you win big and don't keep winning big, they're going to fire you as well. So if you set the bar high and don't keep hitting that mark, they're going to fire you. And of course, if you don't win, they're sure going to fire you.
It's a lose-lose.
It is. That's why it's a tough profession.
Mm-hmm. Well, after that year of teaching, you came back to Oklahoma?
Yes, I came back to Pryor, Oklahoma.
To teach? Or to do something?
To teach and coach. And I was the football coach, assistant coach, football coach, and the head baseball coach at Pryor High School and junior high. And I stayed in that 2 years and just nearly starved to death. And was working construction in the summertime so I could pay my bills. And I thought, as much as I love this, I couldn't get my personal satisfaction to pay my bills. So a State Farm agency came open in Pryor, and I applied for it. And I've been the agent there for almost 40 years now.
Wow.
So it all worked out, but often I thought I could have been in the NFL, but it would have been all those things or the collegiate level, just like I told you. So I made the right decision for
Well,
that.
has the insurance business changed a lot in those 40 years?
Gosh.
Has it?
Light years, yes. Yeah, it sure has. It's gone from manuals to microfiche to computers and just all the things, technology that all of us, has been quite a transformation.
Well, where along that way did the Glass House come in, or to the Conoco self-service, whatever, come into play for you?
Well, that came along when I was 15 and
Still in high school, okay.
still in high school. And I went to work for my dad. All of my siblings, we all worked at the Glass House for Conoco.
By choice, or just?
Yeah, by
or
choice.
did he say you were coming?
No, it was by choice.
Okay.
And we all wanted to, really, and honestly, it was a tremendous job. I think everybody that ever worked there, whether you were summer help and holiday help as a high school kid, or if you worked there full time and, you know, had a family, it was just a great place to work. And I think my dad made it that way, Conoco made it that way, but financially, it was a great job to have.
Well, who would have been your boss? Not your dad.
One of the bosses, I think, may be interviewed today, Wayne Bowie.
Okay, he was yesterday, okay.
Okay, Wayne was, he wasn't really my direct boss. He was my dad's assistant, if you will. And then we had, my dad had shift managers, so that's who I really reported to directly. And of course, they were adults with families, and And so I worked directly under them.
And they knew you were his son.
Oh, yeah.
Did they expect more out of you, or were afraid to act different around you?
Yes, they didn't have to. My dad made me very well aware of that.
Oh.
That you are the boss's son. You're going to be held to a higher standard. And I want you to meet that standard. And it wasn't easy at times. But I didn't get treated, I didn't get any special treatment, just the opposite, really. Mm. But it was just great camaraderie. I wasn't mistreated. In fact, just the opposite.
It was full service back in those days?
Yes, it was. And I mean full service. Younger people would not even comprehend it, but all of us, and my dad was a stickler on this, we all wore Conoco uniforms, which were a dark green pant, a light green shirt, bow ties, polished black shoes with steel-toe tips on them because of the kind of work that we did. And they better be ironed and wrinkle-free and preferably starched if you could afford it.
Would your mother do that, or would you, or would they?
I would do that.
You would do it at 15?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My mother taught me how to iron probably when I was in grade school. Now she did an awful lot, but as we got older, we were expected to do that to help out. So I ironed certainly at 15, I was responsible for ironing all my Conoco work clothes, had my shoes polished, and it was maybe once or twice did I show up and they were wrinkled or my shoes weren't shined, and I got called back to my dad's office. Don't ever let that happen again. I told you you're my son and people are going to watch you, and I learned it real quick.
Well, customers, what would typically you do if someone pulled in for
well, that's when you say full service. Mm-hmm. Two of us would go out to the car.
Two for one car?
For one car. And one of us was in charge of putting gas in the car and everything on the outside. We washed all the windows, at a minimum the front and back. Usually that's what we did, but if they ask us, quote, can you catch them all, we would do that too. So we had one person that filled it up with gas, did the windshield, checked the tires. All of us had tire gauges. So, and many times the customer would tell us 32 all the way around. I mean, I can still remember that. They would also tell us too, and honestly to this day, it still bothers me. If somebody calls me chief, not everybody certainly, but a lot of the public just didn't treat you quite, I don't say quite right, but it certainly isn't equal because they saw you as a service station attendant. So they oftentimes would say to us, fill it up, chief. You check that oil, chief. And that was back in that era, that was a very derogatory term. Not far removed from what I would say would be the N-word, because the Indians, wrongfully and still wrongfully, but they were just not treated right. So certainly I took it that way, and I think kind of that was the way it was meant sometimes. Certainly wasn't a term of endearment. So if somebody calls me chief today, they don't know, it's not their fault, but it stuck with me all those years. But it was, we had a lot of fun though with those folks, because it still just amazes me. But this was in the late 60s, not like the late 1800s. But people from back east, everybody in the country, comes down the turnpike. And in Afton, Oklahoma, which is back kind of north and east of where the glass house was, there was an Indian curio shop there that had some big tourist teepees out there, and there was some buffalo, but the tourists, particularly from back east, invariably would ask us, where are the Indians? You know, like they're still running wild or something, or they're on the reservation where we can see them. So we got asked that so much. It was shameful probably, but they had signs. They still have them on the turnpike, do not drive into smoke. So people were always asking us, what do those signs mean, do not drive into smoke? Well, if they were back east, we knew they were thinking about the Indians, so we would tell them that, well, that's for the Indians, you know, that are on the reservation. You know, sometimes their smoke signals will drift across the highway, and if you drive through those and break that chain, you get pretty upset. And we'd see people driving off, locking their doors, pointing at the kids in the back seat. And it was just in good fun, but we did have quite a bit of fun with that one.
And you get told not to do that?
Did we what now?
Get told not to do that?
Oh, I'm sure we did. I know my dad, but he understood. I mean, it was a hard job dealing with the public in that venue. It was extremely difficult at times.
Or most of your ones asking for you to do all that, men or women? Or was it?
It's usually the men, yeah. It was usually the men.
So it check the oil too?
Yes, the other person would be under the hood, and they check the oil, check your air cleaner, take it completely apart, take the air cleaner out, and we would tap it on the side of this concrete island. You know, bugs and dust, you know, maybe might fly out of it. So, you know, we'd give you our pitch. You know, you might want to consider replacing this air cleaner. It affects your mileage, and some people would just chew you out, cuss you out. Put that back in there, just like you found it. And one of the older men that worked for me, I was one of the other guys at the time working with him on that particular vehicle. And he went through his routine like we all did, and this lady just cussed him out something terrible and said, you put that back in there just like you found it. Well, when he had banged it on this concrete, raised up kind of island there, bugs and dust and everything. Well, when she was hollering and cussing, you put that back in it just like you found it. He just started sweeping all the dust and the grasshopper wings and everything back in there. Of course, that didn't make her happy. But he had a great spirit about him. He'd laugh, you know, when people were cussing him, and she was, and he just laughed. And so, yeah, there was quite a few events like that.
But what would you get paid at 15? Do you remember what your salary was?
Yes, I do.
Pay an hour?
Yes, and it would be right around $175 every 2 weeks. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but for somebody that's 16 years old, and gas was 20, 22, 24 cents a gallon. It was 32 cents for, it seemed like forever, 32.9 on the turnpike. And that was probably about a nickel more per gallon at the most than what people could buy off the turnpike. And we got just hammered about that all the time, about the price of gasoline. I mean, we had no control over it. People, there was never a day that went by that we didn't get chewed out by tourists coming through that had to pay a toll on the turnpike. Because I don't know if there was any, but probably apparently very few. You know, they travel all the way across the country on the interstate highways and then have to pay a toll coming through Oklahoma. And we wore these green uniforms that were kind of similar, not really, but maybe close enough, that looked like the same ones the Turnpike Authority employees wore that were in the toll booth that you came through. Somehow they, I think, made a leap that, you know, we had something to do with the turnpike. So they felt compelled to chew us out for paying tolls. I've come all the way across this country, and every time I come through this blankety-blank state, you know, you all charge. We've tried forever to tell them we don't have anything to do with that, but they wanted to chew somebody out, so, you know, we were the ones out there on the front lines.
Tell them to go around next time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, we had some a few things we told him a few times that probably we can't have on camera, but sometimes it get ridiculous.
Well, would you have other interesting customers, like famous people or?
Oh, gosh, I met everybody.
Anyone
I met
major?
Joe Frazier one day, the heavyweight champion of the world, when he was the heavyweight champion, and got his autograph. I met James Brown, the soul, king of soul, James Brown. Oh, the Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. I mean, he was a big country western singer then. I wasn't really a country western fan, but I knew who he was. A real famous professional wrestler back then was a guy by the name of Gorgeous George. And he drove in one day. And professional wrestling actually was really big back then. And I can still remember, I saw him on TV many times, but he had just super blonde, almost white, wavy hair that he combed straight back. And he pulled up in a pink Tornado. And of course you couldn't help but notice the car right off. And then he was a really big guy. And he stepped out and we were all up in the shop. And right off the bat, we all said, "Man, that is Gorgeous George." So about 4 of us went down there to wait on him, just to get to talk to him. But oh, it's a long list of anybody, if you were traveling through Oklahoma, I mean, pretty much you had to stop, to get gas. So, and a lot of times, these people would go into the glass house, where the upstairs where the restaurant was. So we saw everybody.
Well, would they leave the car while they went up to do that, like with you all doing what you do, or they
Well, they
did that and
wanted
then
to.
move it?
They tried to, but my dad had a very strict rule that they could not leave that car.
Well, that's, yeah.
And there was quite a few arguments with customers over that. He also had a rule that didn't go over well with the customer. But back in those days, cars overheated a lot. So we could hear him a lot of times pulling in off the turnpike a half a mile before they got to us. And the car's just singing because that radiator is so hot. Well, we had 2 or 3 employees just get severely burned trying to check the radiator, and it blew up on that hot water, blew out. So my dad passed a rule that we are not to check that radiator. We're supposed to have the customer pull off the islands into the parking lot, let the vehicle cool down, then bring it over and we'll check it. Well, that wasn't well received because people are on vacation, they're in a hurry, they're stressed out. But I stayed with it. But one particular time, this gentleman just was not going to do that. And he went to get the hose, to do it himself. And so I said, "Here, let me do it. You get back in the car." So we had a process to check that, and we would take the hose and run it back and forth over the radiator before we took the cap off, try to cool it down. And he didn't want to wait even a minute for me to do that, tried to take the hose from me. And I told him to go back to the car. So, and then he pushed me too far to where I got in too big a hurry. So, but we were trained to take our rag, put it on top of the radiator cap, put your weight on it, turn it 1/4 of a turn, then it would let that pressure off. I mean, you could hear the noise. Well, I heard that, and I just let off the pressure just a little bit, and that cap blew completely off. And blew in my face and up my nose, and there's a lot of alcohol in that antifreeze, got in my eyes. I couldn't see. Anyway, this customer was, of course, it got all over his car. He wasn't concerned about me, but he was cussing me for getting all this antifreeze all over his car. So my shift manager saw all what was going on. So he came over, took the hose, and when this customer still was berating me, he took the hose and just started spraying this guy to get him back away.
Yeah.
But it was at times dangerous. And flat tires we had to change, and these semi-trucks, the steel rings could blow off and could kill you. I mean, we had an employee that nearly died, from trying to change one of those. So there was a little bit of danger involved, and it was certainly in the summertime. It was extremely hot. With Oklahoma,
Like today, yes.
just like today, and when you're on that asphalt for 8 hours, we tried everything. We tried to put aluminum foil in our shoes to try to keep the heat from coming through our shoes. And you tried just about everything.
Not the rubber on the bottom.
Oh yeah, we hose each other off, just junior high humor, squirt somebody in. Sometimes with the customers there, we'd set up ice buckets full of ice and water, and if you weren't paying attention and you went into the employee's bathroom, that bucket would be hooked up above the door, and it would turn over, and it'd be 150 on that asphalt, and that ice cold water would hit you. Of course, you're sopping wet. That was a common prank that we pulled on each other.
Well, it wasn't so bad that you quit. You stuck with it.
I did. I loved going to work, and everybody did. It was a great job. I give my dad a lot of credit for that, because now that I've been in business for many years, chemistry is the most important thing on any team.
And your employees.
And he, and no doubt, his assistant manager, Wayne Bowie, I didn't appreciate it at the time, I do now, but that's what made it great, is they hired the right kind of people with the right kind of chemistry. And then, as I look back and have over the years, they were great leaders, much like that high school coach I talked about. All of those people had a great deal of respect for my dad and Wayne Bowie, his assistant. And he created that. It was a family atmosphere. I mean, he had family picnics, all the employees, Conoco paid for that. Several times during the year, it was big family outings. And Conoco and my dad wanted you to bring your wife, children. So they created a great atmosphere to work in, a great camaraderie, and through all that bond, that we all shared with each other, because it was a tough job dealing with the public in that venue. When you go to wait on one of those cars, and it's a man, his family, 2 or 3 kids, they're at the end of their vacation, they're out of money, stressed out, their radiator's overheated, or they just had a flat tire, one of the kids threw up in the back seat. If you can come and wait on that car, and they have them leave with a smile on their face, you can handle just about any customer relations that you need to handle. And I've told the president of State Farm, he's retired now, but a great friend of mine, still is. I told him one time on a fishing trip about just this, my experience at the glass house. I said, I know you all have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars training me all these years, on customer relations, but the best training I ever received was working at the Glass House restaurant for my dad, pumping gas, changing tires, dealing with the public in those kind of venues and stressful circumstances, for them, and as a result, me. But I learned an awful more than I could learn in some of the best training in the world. I learned right out there at the Glass House.
Well, how long did you do it?
Oh, I went there when I was 15, and then I did it right up until I went to Texas to take my first coaching job. So probably 15 to probably about 23, 8, 9 years.
Some part-time or full-time or a mix?
Well, it was full-time in the summer.
When you were here
when I was home for Christmas breaks or holidays, then I would work then. Just full-time in the summer, and then any time in between that I was available, and my dad needed me, which he always needed help. Somebody was always calling in sick or get hurt, or so. Yeah, it was quite a few hours.
Well, what would you do? Like you worked an 8-hour shift sometimes, or a lot of times?
Yes, yeah, we worked, my dad had 10 to 6 shifts. He had 3 to 7, 7 to 3. So he came on at 7 o'clock in the morning, you got off at 3. Then the next shift came on at 3 to 11. And then the graveyard shift, as we called it, came on at 11 and got off at 7. So we were open 24/7.
Would you get to go to into the Glass House restaurant for lunch or dinner or whatever?
Yes, yeah.
If you wanted to?
Yeah, most of the times we brought our lunch because it was pretty expensive to eat in the Glass House. I mean, if you talk to any of the employees that worked for the Glass House, it was, they didn't take them long to realize that it was a failed business model, but it started out as really a 5-star restaurant. I mean, with candelabras and candlelight and linens on the tables. It was pretty plush. But I think they soon figured out that people that were on vacation, you know, the dollars were limited, and so that business model, some of those employees can tell you, I want to say it probably went about 10, 15 years, and then they started changing and scaling it back quite a bit.
And more cafeterias or buffet type of stuff at that point.
That's exactly what they went to, but they had their own bakery. I mean, they had made everything from scratch. It was quite a deal. In fact, I didn't have the time to do it. I wished I would have, but my mother still has that particular month, the National Geographic, you know, the magazines, they still look the same. And the Glass House restaurant is on the cover of the National Geographic.
Remember roughly what year?
Well, it would have been, I can tell you pretty close, it would have been about 57.
When it first, or close to when it was.
And the big heading on that publication was the restaurant in the sky. And many people were calling it the 7th, 8th, wonder of the world. There was nothing like it at the time in the world. And if you were ever in the Glass House, even if you weren't, and I was working, at the gas station part, hundreds of times a day, you'd hear people honk when they went underneath it. I don't know what that was about, but people always felt the need to honk. And even to this day, I'm 65 years old, and if I come down the turnpike and I go underneath the Glass House, I honk.
You honk.
I don't know why.
I do it in tunnels.
Okay, well that's...
Growing up in East Tennessee, we did it in tunnels.
It must be, somebody started that, and so you just feel like you're compelled.
So you're having a nice dinner and you hear honking off.
Yeah, so several times a day we'd be pumping gas and just hear there was just honks going off all the time.
Well, were you, during there in December, would there be snowstorms? People get stranded that way through Europe? Yeah,
they get stranded there, and then we also had service trucks, so when people broke down on the turnpike, flat tire, ran out of gas, then we had service trucks that made service calls, to go get them. So there was quite a few stories that came from that, and quite a few, when it was ice, snow, and fatalities. So it was sometimes not a pleasant trip, to make. Of course, the ambulances and all would be there, but it would be up to us to get the vehicle off the road or contact a record company. But they always called us first to do something with the vehicle. So sometimes when you pick those vehicles up, it was not a pretty sight. And it was really extremely dangerous back then because they fixed that now, but I never traveled the turnpike. I don't think about how it used to be. Now they have concrete dividers down the middle. Used to, it was just a grass hump. So if somebody went to sleep, not only could they cross the center line and hit you, usually they were airborne because they would hit that. And it was pretty significant hump in between there as a divider. And if they didn't come across, sometimes it flipped their vehicle, and it was a dangerous design that fortunately they finally fixed. But rarely do I travel the turnpike and that I not think of the way it used to be and what an improvement no doubt saved a lot of lives. And then we had some horrific accidents out there with grass fires. It wasn't really the Indians, the Indian signal, but the smoke would drift across the turnpike, and obviously blinding. So that's what those signs were for and still are. Mm. Don't drive into it because you can't see, obviously, but people invariably would, I guess, thinking, well, it's just a little bit and I'll come out on the other side. And then they would slam into other vehicles that realized it wasn't just but for a second or two. So then they would make sometimes the fatal mistake of stopping. And they honestly didn't have much choice because they couldn't see, and then vehicles would start slamming into each other. So there was some really bad ones back then.
And when that sort of thing was going on, you might have been in harm's way too?
Yes, it was real dangerous. My dad wouldn't let just anybody go on a service call like that. Okay. And none of us young kids ever got to do that. It was always the senior employees, and boy, it was extremely dangerous too. And there really wasn't much they could do but sit back. They couldn't drive into the smoke themselves. So it was, and I talked to a few of them, it was really a painful situation to be in because you couldn't really help. You couldn't drive into the smoke, but to hear those vehicles hitting each other and, people wailing and dying. There was a few pretty bad ones.
Oh, with the deer population the way it is too, I guess you had issues with that too, from running into that on the turnpike?
Well, strangely enough, we really didn't.
Exactly.
I'm a deer hunter, so I happen to know why. But I was in the woods and outdoors all the time growing up. If I wasn't playing football or working for my dad, I was fishing, hunting, and it was a rare sight back in the city. It was a big deal if we even saw a deer. Mm-hmm. Now, Craig County, I think, is second, third in the state in the number of deer that are harvested each year. And I actually remembered when they first transplanted them, if you will, north and west of Anita, near Centralia, and had wildlife signs posted up, to let you know you don't be hunting these deer. And nobody deer hunted back then because there just wasn't any deer. If you got over around Grand Lake, you might see. So no, we didn't really have that then. Now, I'm in the insurance business with State Farm, so I see it all the time now. Yes. But it was a pretty rare thing. Hmm. So the Wildlife Department has done wonders for the deer population in Oklahoma.
I mean, you see them coming and going, even in daylight. I mean, it's not always at dusk, it's other times of the day.
Everywhere now. Mm-hmm. But back in the 60s, certainly in this part of the state, it was a big deal if you saw a deer. Because everybody, hey, you won't believe this, I saw a deer. But now nobody says that. They're so commonplace.
Yeah, watch out for them.
Right, yeah.
Well, working in the filling station, would you have bus tours come through and anything from tourists to military?
Yes. Whatever was going on in the world, we saw it there. Yes, we had bus tours. During the 60s, it was turbulent times, the Vietnam War, and the country was extremely divided over that war. So we had a lot of protesters coming through, hippies, back in the day. Mm-hmm. And I was raised a patriot by a World War II veteran that suffered enormously through his life for the effects of that war. But he was a die-hard patriot. And he had a very difficult time of seeing a band of hippies, if you will, pull up and have the American flag hung upside down, or have the American flag sewn into a back pocket upside down, or burn the American flag. We all knew that about my dad, so we would make sure he didn't see that, or if he did, we did our best to get him to the office. But he was 6'5", probably about 265, or a 17.5 Triple E shoe. played football for OU, so it was not easy to restrain him. And he had great tolerance, but he had zero tolerance for that. You know, you can protest the war all you want, but disrespecting the flag, he drew the line with that. So we were aware of that, and when we'd see one of the hippies or somebody, we'd make sure we kind of steered them in a different direction. Huh? You best not go that way. But yeah, we saw all of that.
Any interesting cars come through?
Oh yes, every car that was ever on the road. I mean, we saw
even a Tucker.
Yes,
I've seen that movie a long time ago.
There wasn't a car we didn't see, and cars back then had personalities. In my view, they had character. All the cars nowadays, and I've insured thousands of them, they all look the same to me. But back then, they all not only had character, but the gas tanks and the gas caps were in all kinds of places. Oh. So when I first came there at 15, I couldn't drive, so I didn't even know all that lot about vehicles. But like a 1957 Chevrolet, the gas cap is in the fin, the rear taillight, if you will, on the driver's side, and there's a little door that you have to open up, and the gas cap is there. So a lot of times every day, certainly for a few years, I couldn't find a gas cap. And so I'd have to ask the customer, can you tell me where the gas tank is? Most of them were really good about that, but invariably that led to you getting chewed out.
Yes, sir.
You don't even know where the blanket is. I said, no, sir, I don't. You might tell me. And then it was ridiculous sometimes. Volkswagens.
They're in the...
Yeah, in the hood. There was just 56 Chevrolets were in the taillight, but you had to push this reflector button to get it to drop down. It was almost like every manufacturer wanted to be unique in where they put the gas cap. So if you're waiting on those cars, I told a lady one time, when I was 15 and still new, and she did just what you said and my dad didn't want. But she did it before I noticed it, but she said, fill it up, chief. And then she went to the glass house and left her vehicle down there. And we were extremely busy. I mean, they were 6 deep in every aisle. I couldn't find the gas cap, and I was too embarrassed to get one of the shift managers, hey, can you tell me where the gas cap is on this car? And it was a Volkswagen. It was the first Volkswagen, a Volkswagen Beetle. So I had to wait for this lady. She was gone forever. And she had everybody was backed up behind her. And people were hollering at me, customers, to move the car. Well, she had the keys. So, when she finally came back, she showed me where it was. But in the meantime, I had been cussed out, chewed out. And even by the shift manager, what did you let her leave? I said, well, I'm sorry. I turned around and she was gone. There were so many. That first year, we had a truck island for semi-trucks, separate from private passenger vehicles. The truck drivers were really a tough crowd to deal with.
They didn't like playing the toll either, I bet.
No, and we got chewed out by them, and they were the worst of all about calling you chief and talking down to you. Not all of them, but a few of them. But I wasn't to go down to the truck island yet. I didn't have the experience, but we got covered up one day, and the shift manager told me to go down and wait on that semi-truck. So I went down there, and the truck driver said, fill it up with number 2, chief, and then walked off and left in the semi-run. I didn't know what number 2 was. We just had regular and premium back then. But number 2 was diesel. And some, not many, but some semi-trucks back then ran on gasoline, because we had gasoline down there. I didn't know number 2 was diesel. So I was smart enough, at least I took the cap off, what we call the saddle tanks. tried to smell, see if I could tell, if it was diesel or gas, and I couldn't smell diesel. I didn't know what number 2 was, so I started filling it up with regular gasoline and just pouring the gallons in there. And I was standing on the ladder cleaning his windshield, and he got about halfway back down to the truck island, and the semi-truck started choking off and smoking. He saw what was going on. That only was the worst cussing I ever got, but this truck driver chased me around the semi-truck. I was pretty nimble in those days, and I went underneath the trailer, tried to stay away from him. The shift manager came down, got the truck driver off of me, but I had to drain all that gasoline out of those diesel tanks in 5-gallon cans. And it's probably, maybe 100 gallons.
Took you a while then?
It took me a while, and the truck driver was just steps away from me. And he knew better because the shift manager had already threatened him, I think, with his life. But it didn't keep him from cussing me from a distance. He's going to ride Conoco, you're going to pay for this. So dealing with it, that's why I said it was quite an experience in public relations.
You had patience too to not just spout back. You didn't have that instinct to.
Well, and you had, if you didn't have it, you had to acquire it pretty quick. In fact, I never thought of that, but my daughter, who's 40 now, and I was a single parent for probably 5 years, but all the time I was raising her, she always, to this day, comments about, now that she has children of her own, just the enormous patience that I had. I didn't think I had any, but oh, Dad, you just had, it may very well be, now that you mention it, from that experience, because it was every day there was some kind of conflict resolution or confrontation in a pressurized environment. Well,
was there someone above you telling you how to handle this, or were you just had
Yes.
to figure it out yourself?
No, my dad had shift managers, and each one of those shift managers, may have had 10 or 15 men underneath him. And so I was one of those. So yeah, he coached us, but a lot of it really was just on the fly. I mean, there wasn't a school that you went to. You just went to that first car, and usually with a shift manager, and they would show you, check the this and that, and that was another part. And just like the gas caps, the hoods of these vehicles then were the same way. I mean, it was impossible sometimes to find out where is the latch on this thing. After you struggle trying to find where the gas cap was. So you're already stressed out.
You instilled a lot of confidence, didn't you?
Yes. I mean, you're already stressed out. And, you can't find the gas cap. Now you've got to ask them, okay, do you know where the hood release is? And of course they think, you're a service station attendant. You're supposed to know all of this.
You are.
Yeah. Well, in time, I learned quite a bit. But even our most experienced guys, when they came out with a new vehicle, that gas cap might be somewhere else in the next year model. And then the ones we always liked, they would oftentimes come in and not buy any gas, just want you to wash the windshield. And my dad wanted us to do that, but not at the expense of paying customers. So if we were covered up, we would tell them, I'd be glad to do that for you, if you want to wait until we take care of the customers here. And that wasn't always well received. But many times when we could wait on them, it'd be as hot as it is today, and they would leave their car running, sitting in it with the windows up so they could stay cool. Well, all that heat's coming off that engine, while you're trying to wash the windshield of somebody that's not buying any gas. And it was one of my pet peeves, and in this case it was usually the wife that would sit there and peck on the windshield, each little
You missed
bug
this spot.
that you missed. Oh, you missed this, you missed it. And it was impossible to get them off, because you'd come in there at night and they were just completely packed. And then every time you wiped, it just smeared grease, bug grease, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Paying customers and not paying.
Yes, and I came to, at an early age, to come to the opinion that if everybody could work in the service industry, whether it's what I was doing then or the restaurant business, but wait on the general public in whatever capacity, we'd all be a lot nicer to each other if you really knew what that person was dealing with, what they were up against every day. I'm sure it's probably gotten even tougher, you know, as life has become more stressful for people.
Well, did your brothers develop the same? Are they as calm as you are?
Probably one is and probably one's not.
And both of them did the same job for a while?
They did, and my sister worked there as well. Now, my dad, this was in a different era, but he wouldn't let her wait on people, pump gas, but she worked inside the cash register. But yes, we all worked out there at one time or another.
And there was some salesmen?
Yes, quite a bit of selling. Yes.
And you had to do some of that?
Yes, and
that was just part of the routine that you were required to offer?
It was part of the routine, and we did get some training on the selling side. And State Farm for 40 years, you know, has trained me in the sales side and marketing. And still, I told the president, I hate to tell you this, but all the money you spent, that training I got at a young age, because we got 50 cents, 50-cent commission. You know, if your air cleaner needed to be replaced, then we'd say the air cleaner. I can still remember all this, but excuse me, they came in boxes, the air cleaners, in all different sizes. Sometimes it was difficult to find the right one. But we tore off just the corner of this box and wrote on there, and you put that in a cash drawer, and at the end of the day, the shift manager would pay you whatever was owed for. So we sold a lot of air cleaners, a lot of tires, oil changes, you know, if they were low on oil or if it looked like it needed to be changed, then we would recommend an oil change. Well, as I recall, we didn't get commission on that. That was considered just part of service. But tires, air cleaners, windshield washer, wipers, oh, we sold these forever. I mean, we could not keep them in stock, and they were called desert bags, water bags. And when I told you earlier about radiators were overheating all the time, I don't know if these ever worked, but they were sold as that across the country. And they were just, I don't know, maybe a gallon or two of water would they hold. And they were made out of a real heavy burlap. And had a rope on them, and you could hang them over the cap of your radiator. And they would fit inside the front of your radiator and in the grill of your vehicle. So they were sold as emergency water. You know, if you got out here in Indian territory, you know, where you're miles from civilization, or the deserts of Arizona, you would have water to drink, but the purpose was to help keep your radiator from overheating.
Mm.
And if I had $1 for every one of those I sold or we sold, you and I could both probably retire. I'm sure a collector's item now, but almost every service station had them. But we sold them. I mean, like I say, we could not keep them in stock.
What would help it prevent the radiator from getting hot?
None of us knew if it ever did or didn't. There was really no way you could prove that.
It wasn't a cooler. It was just
No,
water.
it was just, well, and it kind of, burlap, I'm pretty sure there was similar material it was made out of. So the water wouldn't just run out, but it would stay moist on the outside. Mm. So the theory was that, you know, that something cool in front of your radiator with all this air blowing back. And then right on that line we sold, that was a big sale, and you could sell one of these. They were terrible looking back, but a lot of vehicles didn't have air conditioning. Mm-hmm. A lot of them. Mine didn't. Somebody came out with a window air cooler. And if you go far enough back like I do, before central air conditioning, we had water coolers in homes. And they fit right in a window like that, filled them up with water. And this paddle fan would turn when you plugged them in. And the theory was that that air coming across that water would cool the room. I think all it really did was add an enormous amount of humidity to the room. But on that concept, somebody came out with window air coolers that would fit on the side of your car. And they were the most difficult things to put together. And they were fairly expensive. And I don't remember what our commission was, but it was pretty significant. And these things had metal arms on them they were cylinder shaped, and probably about this, like this, and probably about the width of your car window. And they had a fan on the front of them that was driven by air, you know, when you're driving down the road. And then you filled them up with water, and then it would blow this supposedly, you know, cooler air into your car. Probably all it did was put more humidity in your car like the window units did. But, it happened more than once. But the first one I sold, and it happened to quite a few people, you get all of it put together. There was a lot of parts to this thing. And you get the braces on there. And the first one I put in, the folks were really excited, and boy, they shook my hand. And I said, you always put it on the driver's side window. So it's right there by the driver. So the gentleman got in his car, family, and they're very appreciative, you know, and I've done a great job selling them, telling them all the great benefits. And I said, well, you all have a great trip. And I shut the driver's door for them, and the arms of those braces fell off, and all that water just poured off to him all over his front seat. Invariably, those things would, they may have fallen off going down the road, but they were a hot item. So back to your question about sales, there was quite a few things that we sold, and a lot of things. I was talking to, which was LeBon Tech, and she worked in the glass house portion, and anything Indian, they couldn't keep them in stock. We kept this a little bit, and then I think Conoco, I recall, kind of got in trouble because we were infringing on International Host, was the company that had the glass house, and they had the concessions. So we stopped selling any curio things, but the glass house had tons of stuff. I mean, from headdresses to rubber tomahawks to spears, bows and arrows. And the folks, tourists, would haul those out of the truckloads. And wearing the headdresses, anything Indian related, and particularly back in the 60s in that era. And we'd always see them being down on the drive, as we call it. Folks that come into their car, that we've been taking care of, and just have their arms full of headdresses and tomahawks. It was different there. And too, we saw, in 1969, the year I graduated from high school, I was working for my dad the night that they landed on the moon. And that was a unique experience too, because we didn't have the technology. This was black and white TV, but people stopped, and really from all over the country that were traveling down the turnpike to try to find a TV. And we happened to have just a little black and white one set up in the grease room. We didn't expect just going to be a handful of us employees. But when word got out that we had a TV back there, it was probably the size of, maybe what would have been like a 4-car garage. 2 big grease tracks back there. And of course, you imagine all the grease and oil, and it was packed wall to wall, and people out onto the parking area to try to get a glimpse of, one small step for man. And then everybody clapped, and there was people I didn't even know, people crying. It was a big deal. So there was, whatever was going on in the world was going on out there, from the Vietnam War to moon landings to famous people. It was one of the great experiences of my life. I think probably anybody would tell you that certainly worked on the part that I did, just the people we saw and what was going on in the country. And when you're dealing with the public on that level, then of course you get their opinions too as well. So it was a great, from politics to war to, I don't know, sometimes almost it's kind of like your barber, or maybe hairdresser for you. People are just, you're kind of a stranger of sorts, and they're just, so you could be washing the window, filling the car full of gas, checking air, and people would be talking to you about what was going on in the world and what their view was. And sometimes they'd say, well, what do you think? I learned pretty quick not to go down politics or religion or the war.
It's a slice of Americana, isn't it?
It was, and that's probably a great way to put it. It was a huge slice and it was some really turbulent times then. Martin Luther King was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy, the Vietnam War, Elvis. I didn't get to see Elvis.
He didn't come through while you were working.
He didn't. He came through, and I missed him.
You missed him.
Elvis had left the building by the time I got there. But that was a big, anytime somebody saw somebody famous, that was a real big buzz.
I understand he's living in Welch, Oklahoma. Elvis is.
Is that what now?
Elvis is living in Welch, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think I saw him at Walmart before I came up here. Yeah, he's still alive. That's all in a conspiracy. Elvis is still alive. Yeah. Yeah, it was. We've all talked about it for just years. Anybody that ever worked there, it
was an education.
It was. It was an education in life and human relations and just about anything. Politics, auto mechanics, worldviews. I mean, it was a cross-section of people from every walk of life, every race, every ethnicity. I mean, you met them all. Now, that doesn't happen now because the full service is gone, so people just, I mean, you know the drill. I mean, you just pull up, fill it up, and you're gone.
Yeah. And hope your tires are okay.
And hope your tires are okay, and that your oil is fine. But back in that era, just as I described, I mean, there was 1 or 2 people waiting on that customer, and gosh, it might be a 15-minute deal.
Per car.
Yeah, assuming everything went right. It was quite a process, to service that whole car. It's such a, I mean, young people now, and I've told some of these stories to my kids, and they just can't fathom it because they've never known it. But almost all of them have said, golly, I wish we had those days again.
There's nothing really comparable for that type of job for this generation of kids.
No, there isn't, and I'll tell you, I've often thought of this, and people have told me, well, it won't work now, you know, because of self-serve, the cost of gasoline, that you can't afford to have somebody, you know, doing what I just described. But I've often thought that if I was 16 years old, I would go to one of these quick trips or, you know, wherever it is, and just volunteer, just do it for tips. Don't even charge people. Just get you a tire gauge and do all those things that I said and fill their gas up and all, and then just let the customer's conscience be their guide as to what they feel like that's worth. Because I still contend that even more so, you know, as pressed and stressed as people are for time now, it's their most valuable asset. It always has been, but it really is now. If you could save them time and care for their vehicle that they don't have time for, I think there's value in that.
Plus, an individual service is appreciated by most people.
Yes.
Too, so add that with it. Yeah.
And you hit on a key word right there, appreciation. It's one of people's most basic human needs, is to feel appreciated. So if you had somebody, if I was an owner, even if it's a 16-year-old kid in that exchange, certainly if they're trained right, you could really, if you were the owner of that business, they could be shown how much they're appreciated. We're not even going to charge you for this service. If you feel like, you know, the kid was worth something to you, you know, we'll let you tip him.
It sounds like a good retirement job.
There you go. I've thought of it many times, but it drives my wife crazy sometimes because I'll comment on that. You know, when I'm out there pumping and it's 120 and I know my windshield needs to be cleaned, I might do it, I might not. In fact, when I did it, not to mention this, I did that just a week or so ago. And my wife was sitting in the shotgun seat and she started tapping on that windshield. And went right around the side and said, don't do that, and don't call me chief either. And I'm not checking the tires either, too. But hey, I've always thought that maybe somebody will watch this video and come up with that idea. Some 16-year-old kid that can't find a job, go down there and ask that convenience store owner, I won't charge you anything. And you can fire me if you don't think, you know, it's a service to your people and I'm just going to work for tips.
Even a Conoco.
Even Conoco.
Even a Conoco.
Yeah.
I think that might be a good way to stop, don't you?
Yes, it'd be fine.
Well, I do appreciate you coming in.
Oh, you bet, Tom.
It was great.
Oh, it was great for me too.